Let's jump right in because today we are breaking down a seriously eye-opening reality check on the Australia income gap for 2026. We're going to see what every single income level in this country actually feels like once you factor in real life, taxes, and those everyday bills.
Picture this scenario. Two people, same city, same night. Over here, we have someone making minimum wage, nervously checking their bank balance before buying a coffee. And over here, we've got someone making $350,000 a year doing the exact same thing. They've got completely different numbers sitting in those accounts, but exactly the same financial anxiety. So we're going to break down why that happens by walking through every major income level, from minimum wage all the way up to the top 1%.
Section 1. Surviving the math, 52K and 60K.
Okay, let's start at the foundation. After the Fair Work Commission's July increase, the minimum wage sits at roughly $52,255 a year before tax. But of course, that means about $45,000 in actual take-home pay, landing you at roughly $1,730 a fortnight. Now, on paper, that might sound, okay to some. But let's see what happens when the real world hits that paycheck.
Because in most capital cities right now, rent alone just eats up $600 to $700 a week. In Sydney, the median is pushed past $850. Think about that for a second. That massive chunk means over half of your pay is completely gone before you've even thought about groceries, the power bill, or just getting to work.
And this brings us to a really crucial point. At this level, saving isn't a discipline problem. It's just a math problem. If you're struggling here, you absolutely need to hear this. The system is not built for you to easily get ahead at this income. It is literally not a personal failing on your part.
So let's move up a bit to the typical Australian earner, sitting on roughly $60,000. That brings home about $50,000 a year, or $1,930 a fortnight. At this level, you finally get a tiny bit of slack in the rope. We're talking maybe $100 spare a week after covering the basics.
I absolutely love this quote. The breakout point isn't a raise, it's a decision. Because this right here is the bracket where your personal habits start to matter way more than your actual income. If you can take just half of that spare cash, seriously, even $50 a week, and invest it consistently for a decade, you end up in a completely different financial reality than someone who doesn't.
Section 2. The moving goalposts, 80K and 100K. Let's look at the math for an $80,000 salary. Bringing home roughly $64,000 a year means about $2,450 a fortnight. This is a huge milestone. It actually puts you ahead of 60% of taxpayers. You finally have the breathing room to rent solo outside of Sydney, top up your superannuation, and build a real, proper emergency fund.
But here is the fascinating part. $400,000. That is what you can build if you just manage to avoid lifestyle creep. Because the temptation at this bracket is real, right? The newer car, a bigger apartment, going out for dinner 4 nights a week. But if you keep spending like you're still making $60,000 and instead invest that $15,000 gap, over 15 years, that discipline alone can compound right past $400,000.
All right, let's step up to the famous six-figure mark. At $100,000, you're pulling in about $77,500 in take-home pay, which is $2,980 a fortnight. You are officially in the top 30% of taxpayers. By all accounts, it is objectively good money.
But we've got to face a stark reality here. 6 figures used to mean you had made it. It meant a house deposit in just a few years. Today, it barely keeps pace with rent in a major city. With Sydney's median house price still hovering near $1.73 million, even after a recent price dip, that 100K hasn't lost its intrinsic value, but the goalposts, they've moved far faster than the paycheck.
Section 3. High incomes, high traps.
When you enter the top 17% of earners, the whole game changes. At $133,000, bringing home nearly $100,000, wealth building genuinely opens up. But the trap here? It's comparison. You start hanging around people earning $250K, and suddenly your $133K starts to feel kind of small, which is crazy because you're out-earning 4 out of 5 Australians. And as we move into those $180,000 and $250,000 brackets, your take-home pay is incredibly strong, sure, but each of those levels brings its own unique pitfall.
Let's drill down into that $180,000 earner's reality for a second. You're in the top 8%, pulling in nearly $5,000 a fortnight, though to be fair, your effective tax rate is climbing up toward 28 or 29%. So why on earth does it still feel so tight for so many people in this bracket?
It's stacked commitments, a massive mortgage, 2 car loans, private school fees. The income is rarely the actual problem here. It's all these heavy commitments just stacked directly on top of it.
Moving up to $250,000, a totally new number dictates your life, 47 cents. Taking home around $166,600 means nearly $83,000 has gone straight to tax and Medicare. Almost half of every extra dollar you make above $190,000 goes right to the government. At this point, a tax strategy isn't just an option, it's basically mandatory. But for those disciplined earners who are aggressively saving, this is the bracket where hitting full financial independence within 10 to 15 years becomes highly realistic.
Section 4. The top 1% and the core lesson.
And here we are, the top 1%, earning $419,000 or more a year. After roughly $163,000 gets pulled out for taxes, you were taking home around $256,000. Now, at this level, money completely stops being the main constraint in your life. The new constraint? It's time.
Which leads to this incredibly important realization. The real risk isn't running out of income, it's assuming it lasts forever. Because the truth is, careers shift, entire industries change, and your health is never, ever guaranteed. The people who actually manage to stay wealthy in this top bracket, they're the ones intensely focused on turning that high income into assets, things that are going to keep paying them long after the day job stops.
So that begs the ultimate question for all of us today, right? What actually creates financial freedom? Well, if we've learned anything at all from walking through these brackets, is that we need to shift our focus completely away from our gross salary number.
Financial freedom really comes down to just a single concept, the gap. It is simply the space between what comes into your bank account and what goes out. No matter what bracket you sit in, what you decide to do with that gap consistently over time is the true undeniable driver of wealth.
Think about it like this. An $80,000 earner who manages to save half their income will absolutely outbuild a $200,000 earner who spends it all. It was never really about the number on your payslip. Financial freedom lives entirely in the gap. So, my final question to you today is, what are you doing with your